Join me on my quest to visit every locally owned bookstore in my state.
Is it accurate that you have visited 125?
Yes, which is kind of bonkers to say. It's a form of marketing that doesn't feel like work. It feels like fun.
Welcome!
Oh my Ow.
I'm sorry. You put me so close to the mic.
I know.
Welcome to the Bright and Ambitious Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Bright.
And I am the producer of the show, Joel Seymour. Today's a very special day that this is coming out because it's my birthday.
It's your birthday.
It's my birthday. What
and
better?
You can cry if you want to.
I can, but I'm not going to because instead of me getting presents, we're giving y'all a very special present with this very special episode.
Is it special because we have a recurring guest?
Yeah, and also that it's 2 weeks late. But is this our first recurring guest?
That's why I thought you said it was special.
Yeah.
This is our first recurring guest, Whitney McRudder. She came on the podcast for season 1 talking about why diversity still matters in writing. When I was first researching what I wanted to talk about with the episode with her, I made a note that we could have a whole episode dedicated to her physical and digital footprint.
She has a series on Instagram where she is currently going to every single bookstore in Texas.
Today, we're visiting Secret Garden Books and More. This is a fairly new bookstore that I hope won't remain a secret.
Her last video that she posted in this series has over 70,000 views.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah. And so it was a really fun conversation because you got to talk to her about how she got started on this series. How did she find out that this would be a successful series? You got to talk about how it's benefited both her career as an author, but also how it's benefiting the communities and the bookstores that she's going to.
Yeah, I think any existing author who is trying to make a platform for themselves should absolutely listen to what Whitney has done.
Let's jump right in.
Let's do it. We're here with Whitney McRudder. Yes. I don't remember how many bookstores you had visited at the time, but is it accurate that you have visited 125?
Yes, absolutely. Which is kind of bonkers to say, but yeah, it's been 125 across, let's see, California, Oregon, Utah, Texas, and Oklahoma.
Wow. Okay, so not just Utah and Texas anymore.
Yeah. If I'm in a different area, it's gone to the point where people are like, we gotta take you to our bookstore, if that makes sense. So that is so and I'm like,
cute.
I'm like, I'm all for it.
Yeah. So that's over a span of how many years?
2.5 years, I think. I started in February of 2023. I initially started it because I've always had this goal of wanting to see my books in the bookstore. Mm-hmm. I think seeing your own work in a bookstore or a library is just so cool. Not only is it on my shelf or maybe on the shelf of, like, say, a family member or a friend, right? But like, it's for sale. People can see it and touch it and buy it, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was emailing some bookstores in my area. I was living in Utah at the time. And I was more or less following what authors typically do, or I'd say what publishers typically do. Because if you're traditionally published, your publisher is reaching out to bookstores. And so I was reaching out, filling out these Google forms or emailing, and I just never heard back. And I just chalked it up to, I'm an indie author and I'm stuck in an inbox. And so I was like, I'll just go in person. And I printed out a 1-pager, which is essentially like a resume for my book. Like, here are the ISBNs, here's my author bio, and the like. and I introduced myself. And post-pandemic, I felt like I was stuttering a lot or just like tripping over my words. I was like, when was the last time I spoke to another human being besides my husband? So I would say the first time I talked to a bookseller, it was super awkward, but it was essentially me saying, I live 20 minutes away. I'm a fantasy author. And if you are accepting indie authors in your inventory, I'd love to set something up. Like, basically just learn more about what that process looks like. And I think from there, it just kind of blossomed from not just visiting stores that held my genre, but just any indie bookstore I could get to. And I would say like the content itself started because the first bookstore I went to, which is called Poppy's Books and Gifts, I noticed that they were a couple months old, and it was like, oh, I just want to shout out. It's like a really cute bookstore. One of the owners is also named Whitney. And so we developed a really nice relationship from that awkward encounter on. But it was kind of like I shared it in my Instagram story, I think. And then I made a full video because, again, as an author, you're like, what kind of content should I share? Right. Yes. So I just took little videos that you'd normally put maybe in like an Instagram story. But then I put them together into a video and did my first voiceover. So I like wrote a script and then just talked a little bit about the bookstore. And then I just thought, I really don't know where I thought of it, but I was like, this could be a fun series of me shouting out different bookstores. And so it kind of started out as more like a win-win situation of, hey, if we work together, I promise to talk about you, like, as opposed to just my books are on your shelves and that's it. It's like also letting people know to go shop there, right? So hopefully buy my book, but just really any book, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it started. And then I ended up going to all of the bookstores in Utah at that time. They have since opened several more since I moved away. So I already have like, I think about 10 or so to visit next time I'm in Utah. Wow. But Utah has around like 30 to 40 at the time. So that was a very easy quest at the time. I think I got through all of them pretty much within a year, because then I moved shortly after that. It was kind of intense just how quickly it went from visiting all the bookstores to suddenly moving. And then when I looked at the list for Texas, I was, I guess, pleasantly surprised. Realized it was going to take a lot more than just a year to get through all of the bookstores.
Yes. I mean, like, everything's bigger in Texas, right?
And also way spread out. I think the furthest I drove was about 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I was thinking like, wow, that's really intense. And even with that, I would travel with my husband and we made it like a weekend trip, as opposed to 3 hours, visit a bookstore and then drive home. And then conversely here, I have done that sort of trip, like round trip several times. I've driven even further than that for book events or just to visit a bookstore. The furthest I've driven with members of my book club is 8 hours to El Paso.
Wow.
So, Texas really is huge. And so I think that's part of the fun of the challenge, is that it's just so out of the norm. Because I think the average person, if they're going to go to the bookstore, they're like, what is the closest thing? Right. And I do have Barnes and Noble that's 10, 15 minutes away, Half Price Books. And then recently we got an indie bookstore that's about 15 minutes away. And so if I were to be like a normal book buyer, of course I'm going to do that. But it's also a fun challenge to say, yeah, I drove several hours to get to this one bookstore. And if I do make a drive like that, I do tell the bookseller, just because I think it makes me feel good, or just like kind of like triumphant. But also they're probably like, wow, she came all the way from San Antonio, which is a big city, to come to our city. But I think, sometimes it's nice to hear that of like, someone saw you and wanted to support you, even if it took a little bit of time and planning to get there.
Picking up different threads from what you were talking about. I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable to tell the bookseller, hey, I drove like X amount of hours to come here, because I mean, they really do care. Like the fact that you cared enough to do that, that shows a lot more passion than most of their patrons. And that
Yeah.
could potentially be a leg up or an encouragement for them to stock your book because you went out of your way to go see them.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I would recommend if other authors are wanting to more or less copy or emulate what I'm doing is sometimes showing your hand like that, I think can lead to at least more of a consideration as opposed to leaving it to a DM or a message, especially if it's a newer bookstore, like they're about to open or they just open. I think they're more likely to extra mile work because, yeah, the typical author isn't driving 8 hours to.
Indie authors are.
For sure. Yeah. Well, I would say also traditional authors, again, it's likely that their literary agent or their publisher is doing the outreach, and then they may show up for a book signing, right? And so I know that this is really going like literally the extra mile. And it doesn't always work out where I get exactly what I want, and I'm also not getting paid a ton of money from social media content as well. And so sometimes it's like the good karma comes back, and other times it's like I still had a great experience because it was a fun trip. Say like sometimes the bookstore may not even isn't a good fit for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean I won't visit them or shout them out, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think that was one of the questions I had was just like, have you ever like staked a place before to see if it was somewhere your books could thrive?
If they're active on social media, I think it's pretty easy to tell what kind of books they carry, or even just like by the branding, what audience they're going for. And especially since in recent publications, I've gone more into the romantasy realm, that's opened me to romance bookstores, which those are some of my favorite because they're always so cute. And I feel like they are the most like, especially if you like to buy things that surround books, like Kindle accessories or t-shirts or mugs or whatever, like they're always, I don't know, to me, they just fit the kind of audience I am or the audience I'm catering to. And so it's like, yeah, a kid in a candy store. Yeah, I would say it's like a mix of the two. Sometimes I do stake it out, but I'm also not bringing books with me. I'm not trying to like sell books out of my trunk, if that makes sense.
Hey, I mean, someone might. That's why I had to ask.
I know. I mean, I tend to work more with newer bookstores just because I think that's just what's on my feed right now. The ones that are just opening up and looking for stuff to put on their shelves. So that's always a win-win, I would say, for authors.
In the case of like local bookstores, these are people who are as passionate about books and writing as authors are. And they're not like faceless entities like Barnes and Noble or Amazon would be. So you can have more of an actual conversation and get networking, interpersonal relationships made if you go in person. I am curious what made you decide the scope of your bookstore questing. Once you decided, you're like, all right, I want to visit more. I have this itch. What made you decide, like, I'm going to do the whole state and, like, I'm going to visit all of them no matter what they cater to?
I think it came from the encouragement that I got from people in person or online. Because once it started to gather, I'd say like relatively positive attention, it was, oh, you got to visit XYZ. It's my favorite, or they just opened, or sometimes people would even want to come with me, like set up a bookstore crawl, and especially like a bigger city where there's a few close together. But yeah, I think it kind of started from there of just it became more of a community thing of it's kind of like running a marathon and people are cheering you on from the sides. So you're like, okay, I can keep going. I can keep running. Right.
Yeah.
And especially when I started in Utah, I was thinking 30 to 40. I mean, that's still a lot to visit in a year. I'll give you that. But it was, to me, it felt doable. I should probably also mention I work from home. And so I was able to finagle my work hours where either on weekends or maybe on Fridays, that's when I'm actually visiting bookstores, as opposed to, again, I feel like most people it's not as often, but for me, I was able to make it work because I have a lot more control over my schedule. And especially now that I have a newborn, it's going to be even tougher of just making sure that it's, I mean, I'm not going to just say like, bye, honey. I'm going to go drive 3 hours and come back. Right. It takes a little bit more planning and a little bit more, foresight, but, I don't think very many people do this. And so it kind of felt like my special thing. Not that I am hoarding it and that people can't do the same thing. In fact, there are several people who I know are doing the same kind of record keeping of just trying to keep tabs on as many indie bookstores as possible, or maybe they're focusing on their own home state or their own local area. But yeah, it just kind of like felt like my special thing. And especially once I was either getting my books on the shelf or I was setting up book signing opportunities or just author events, it kind of felt like, yeah, let's keep going. Let's just see where this goes. And I would say this was a huge reason why I started having more events where even more people could talk to me in person or see my books in the bookstore. And in fact, I should probably also add several bookstores, especially since I was new to events and they were new to me. A lot of times they said, how about we set up an author signing, see how it goes, and then we may add your books to our shelves, or we may like have like an author consignment for 5 copies or something. It was like, let's see how many people you can draw in and see if that's worth us adding to our inventory. Because clearly if like no one showed up, it's like, okay.
That is so scary.
But to me, up until that point, I think I maybe did one event. So I was like, sure.
Oh,
and I'll get
okay.
to the table. This is awesome. You know, if no one shows up, I didn't pay anything, you know,
That's true.
and so, and it definitely gave me a lot more confidence to do more events. I became more well-known in that area. I think some of my favorite memories where I really felt like I was being perceived in a positive way is when I would show up to a bookstore and they're like,
I know you.
They're almost like, oh, get your camera out. We, like we're ready to go. I'm like,
that is so cute.
I mean, yeah. And I never expect like influencer treatment of like wanting free stuff or special treatment. If anything, I don't like to be perceived when I'm filming, because then it's like, here I am, just a creeper, just like taking videos in your store. Hopefully they know it's for a positive thing and not like, come with me to visit the worst bookstore experience I've ever had, But yeah, that was really cool. Just having that moment, especially if a friend or Travis was there, I was like, do you see that? Do you see that? They noticed me going somewhere.
That was something I was curious about, was like how you documented. So it sounds like it's when you're with other people, you have Travis as someone who can record for you. And then when you're by yourself, you're just like, hey, warning. I'm not a creep. I just want to share y'all with the world.
Exactly. I mean, I've never had anyone say you're not allowed to or please don't. Yeah. You want to do some free marketing for us? Thank you so much. Right?
Yeah. The symbiotic relationship between indie bookstores and indie authors.
Right. Yeah. I think we just understand each other so well of we all love books for the love of books, and then marketing is just in the way. It's like a necessary evil for many of us. I don't know very many booksellers or authors who fully love marketing, unless maybe that's what they studied in school, and so they understand it really well, and it just maybe that comes more naturally to them. But I feel like most people are, if they had the choice, they would just be authors. They would just write the books and maybe sign them. And that's it, you know.
And maybe someone will talk about them and leave a review.
Right. Yeah. Like I feel like if we had a book signing tour laid in our laps, we'd be like, that's awesome. I'd love to go talk to my books with people who already love me and know me, right? You know, like rolling out the red carpet. That's always a nice feeling. But I think for most of us, it's okay. I do have to do some marketing in order to reach my publishing goals and whatever that looks like. So
for writers and authors who want to like essentially create their own series, like what kind of advice would you give them to pursue that?
Probably to start off is just make it your own. You know, anything else we share online, we try to make it somewhat niche or somewhat like, okay, this could be the upteenth romantasy book, but this is what makes mine different, or what makes mine unique, or why you should pick mine up, right? And so I would say, like, when I started, it was I really am trying to visit every bookstore in Texas, which I feel like if I ever get anything negative or passive aggressive, it's usually like, really, everyone, like, kind of like, are you crazy? And I'm like, yep, I mean it. I've seen other accounts, like I'll shout out Paperback Highway. She's also a creator in San Antonio, and there's a lot of overlap with the bookstores that we've visited, but her content is different, where instead of videos, she shares kind of like a scrapbook style feed. And so it's more photography, and her pictures are incredible. Her name and her branding is more of like, I'm in it for the sake of like road trip vibes. Can't remember her username, but there's someone else who reached out and specifically said, like, you inspired me to do one for my area. And she lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And so same idea, but it's just a different area of the country. What she wants to share is just like how beautiful and gorgeous those bookstores are. Like, I feel like a big city bookstore is very chic and very cute. Also, the more you are liking or interacting with content related to bookstores, the more ads you're going to get about bookstores. And so that could be a great way to get to know which ones are near you. What's new. Attending grand openings is another fun thing. That's a perfect excuse to introduce yourself. Sometimes bookstores will have authors signing on their grand opening. So if you want to get even ahead of it, you can say, I saw that you had a call for authors, or like, you're having a grand opening. I'd love to participate in any way. And that could be a great in as well. I have had that experience of attending a grand opening and seeing my book in the bookstore, and it's hard to not be emotional because you're like, all this hard work led to this, you know?
It's here.
And grand openings tend to be very successful. So it's a great way to have a bunch of people see your stuff.
Absolutely. The more we can like help with each other or help each other, the better, truly.
Yeah, there's a sort of a creative high that happens when, you have a signing at a local bookstore, just because it definitely reminds you of, this is why I'm doing all this in the first place. Very motivating to see people in person and talk about my books. And even if it's like socially draining afterwards, it's still like, man, that was so much fun.
Absolutely. It's very easy to tire yourself out with marketing and trying to write and have your normal life, and just a lot of juggling, right? A lot of making sure the glass balls don't break and dropping the plastic ones when they need to fall.
Exactly. And of course, just share the content in a way that makes sense to you or feels like I could do this hundreds of times.
Yes, consistency is key.
Yeah. My first handful of videos, I was thinking like, what do I even say? And that's when I came up with the hi, hello.
Hi,
That's how
hello.
start
I
every
was wondering
video.
when you're going to say that.
So yeah, after a while, I sort of had a template of this is how I start and end each video. If someone was looking at my feed, they could see, okay, this is a series that all match each other. So it's just fun. I feel like one of the top comments I get is some sort of iteration of, I've lived in this city for X many years and I didn't know this place existed. And they're like excited to go check it out, or like, oh, I didn't realize it's like 5 minutes away from me. And you would think, wouldn't you not be aware of that? But again, people aren't Googling bookstores like I am. And so
No.
if anything, it's like, here's my public service. Go visit that bookstore. They would love to see you.
I love that. I love that slogan. I'm just like, this is my public service. And that is going to every local bookstore in my state.
I think I may have like slightly answered this, but I want to give like a more definite answer. And this is just, how do writers actually find all these bookstores, or how do I find bookstores? And I would say I started my list using the list of bookstores from the ABA. That's the American Booksellers Association. I imagine that's different if you're from a different country, but this is the organization that runs the Indie Bookstore Day events. And so it's not a complete list, because bookstores have to be a member of the ABA to be on this list. But this is what traditional booksellers use to tell their authors, okay, we're going to connect you with XYZ bookstore. That's where they start, as opposed to Googling or using Google Maps or some sort of like map app, right? But I started with that. And then on top of that is more or less the algorithm and also comments. I end each of my videos by asking people, which bookstore should I visit next? And so a lot of my comments are recommendations of, oh, this one just opened, or this one's my favorite. And of course, sometimes it's ones that I've definitely have been to and I've definitely posted about, but I'm nice about it.
Hey, it's engagement.
Exactly. And it's nice too. It just means that they love that bookstore and they want to shout it out, right?
Right.
So I usually say something like, oh, I love them, or I'm due to visit them again. You know, I don't necessarily say, weren't you paying attention to the hundreds of videos I've made?
No, don't do that.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a great way to get your books out there, just because more often than not, when you have an event at the bookstore, they don't charge you a table fee. It's just you sell the books through their register, and then you do that 60-40 split more often than not.
I've even done events at coffee shops where I just sell my book right there, like it's another normal event.
Yeah, I love that, especially at a coffee shop where people are likely also fans of books, but they didn't expect to see you there. So it's...
I know. I had a lot of people just be like, what are you doing here? Like, what's going on?
But I feel like books and coffee, they go well together.
I really appreciate you chatting with me and being on the podcast again. Like, this has been a real treat. I'm just glad I get to connect with you again.
It's so much fun. I'm so glad you asked me. The author side of things, the bookstore side of things, I feel like they just kind of go hand in hand, where I feel more excited to write stuff because then it's more exciting to do the victory lap of, you know, reaching out to all my bookseller friends like, hey, I have a new title for you, that type of thing. Yeah, it's a form of marketing that doesn't feel like work. It feels like fun. It feels like a quest, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, support local is it's always the drum that I'm beating there.